Hello, class, and welcome to this Urban Entrepreneurship Practicum mini lecture. The topic of this mini lecture is the process for developing an urban focused business. I know we talked about this in class, but it's an important enough topic that I think it bears going over again and to provide you with a recording that you can go back and review later. So, uh, this is going to be a clean recorded version of the information that we discussed before. Now, before we get into the lesson, let's do as we always do and let's review the objectives for this session. So, we're going to outline the steps for developing a new urban focused business. We're going to describe the uh, community engagement process, also called socially engaged design or human-centered design. We're going to describe the customer slash marketplace engagement process, also known as the customer development process. We're going to start applying this urban focused business development process to an actual business opportunity. In fact, the business that you will be working with. And we're going to identify high level steps for improving that existing business model or any existing business model. So that's what we're going to be doing in this lesson. So here we go. Let's talk about the steps to develop an urban focused business. So nowadays, when we talk about developing a new business, uh, we often invoke the customer development process. This is a process that was popularized by kind of the entrepreneurship guru of recent years, a fellow by the name of Steve Blank. And it talks about how you go from uh, an idea to a company. What are the steps? How do you make that transition? How do you go on that journey? And the process begins with something called customer discovery. Then it goes into customer validation, goes into customer creation, and then company building. Customer discovery, you're trying to determine, do I have a product that people want? And then under customer validation, you're trying to determine, do I have a product that I can sell to a number of people? And customer creation, in a nutshell, is once I've determined that I have a business model where I can sell this product repeatedly, uh, can I scale that process so I can sell to a lot of people using that business model? And then the fourth step, can I build a large company? Can I scale up the organization and scale up my processes and introduce new product lines related to the initial one where I've developed a large and sustainable company. So those are the basic steps. But as we consider this, I mentioned that we started with an idea, right? Where'd that idea come from? Where'd that initial product idea come from? So when we talk about developing an urban focused business, we need to put some steps in front of the customer development process. So if we're truly trying to develop a product or service that improves the quality of life in an urban community, we need to engage in some steps before we get to the actual product. And those steps include uh, selecting a community that we want to work in. But once we've selected that community, uh, the steps are to empathize with that community. In other words, to understand, get to know the community, get to know the people in it, and to understand the needs of that community. And then the next step is to define an important problem that, once solved, will improve the quality of life in that community. Once we've set upon a problem to solve, we need to generate ideas about how we might solve that problem, the best way to solve that problem in terms of a business opportunity. And we do that through a brainstorming process that we often call ideation. Um, Once we have what we think is a solution to the problem, we need to prototype the solution and test the solution. So those are the basic steps in the socially engaged design process. It's also sometimes called the human-centered design process or simply design thinking. But the steps are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So to develop a product or service that truly meets an important need or solves an important problem in an urban community, that improves the quality of life, that results in an improvement in the quality of life in that community, we need to invoke uh, what we call the urban focused business design process. And that process involves uh, first going through these socially engaged design process steps before we get into the customer development process steps. And you might say, well, there are lots of cases where people come up with an idea, they're familiar with something, they're already living in the community, they might come up with something themselves uh, uh, without having gone through, those earlier steps. They might just have a bright idea about something they can do to improve the quality of life in that community. They might come up with a business idea that they think will work based on their experience. I would still encourage that person to go back and think about those earlier steps to really get engaged, make sure you're engaged with the people who might need that product, to define the problem that uh, the product represented by your idea is designed to solve, to think about what other solutions there might have been. Maybe there are better approaches than the one that your idea represents, or maybe you could tweak that idea better if you had a better understanding of the problem you're trying to solve. So we can go back, even if we uh, have an idea, even if we find ourselves at the beginning of that uh, customer development process, we can still go back and engage in this socially engaged design process. And I highly recommend doing that because it will result in a more solid approach once you get to the customer development process. So let's step back for a moment and think about the first stage of this process, this community engagement process. And we can think about, how would you do it? How would you, for the business that you are working with, how would you go about engaging the community to be sure that you have a sense of what that community needs, that you've defined the problem, and so forth? How would you go about doing that? And you can also think about, how did your urban entrepreneur partner accomplish it? Did they intentionally go about to identify a problem and then solve, or did they just kind of come up with an idea? If they did come up with an idea based on some experience they had or something, did they go back and kind of systematically look at those uh, uh, socially engaged design steps? Um, so think about that as you go forward. Now, before we even get into the socially engaged design process, before we get into empathizing with the community, we have to choose the community that we want to work with. And as an aside, if you were thinking about just going to work in some community, getting a job and going to work, say after you graduate, uh, if your objective is just to start a career at a company in a particular community, how would you go about choosing that community? Would it be the location that you would be most concerned with? Would it be the interesting work? Would that override location? I know for me it did. I went to work in New Jersey after college, And I had no desire to work in New Jersey, to live in New Jersey, but that happened to be where the best career opportunity was for me. So that interest overrode the location. Uh, is your objective to be near family or to be away from family? Uh, that's another potential uh, uh, concept. Uh, or would you choose where you go based on the colleagues that you might find in that location? So again, there are a number of criteria that one might apply to choosing a community if you are uh, going to that community to take a job at a company there. Quality of life, compensation, you know. Now, if your objective is to start a business that serves a community, you might look at it differently, and you might have different criteria for the community you choose. So it might be something like, uh, what are the opportunities in this community? Uh, do I have an affinity for the people? Do I empathize for the people in this particular community? How easy is it to do business, to start a business, and to continue a business in this community? And is it safe for me to be in this particular community? Uh, what are the costs of doing business in this particular community? So as you can see, uh, based on whether you are simply going to work in a community, going to choose a job in that community, or start a business, the objectives that you choose, the criteria that you use to choose that community might be different. So the first step in this socially engaged design process is to get immersed in the community, to get to know it, to get to know the people, get to know the businesses, the organizations, get into the media and understand what's going on in the community. Basically, empathize with that community. And in particular, if you're interested in working in a particular area like health or public safety or mobility or education, you need to know what's going on in that area, in that community. And your idea, your objective is to get to know enough where you can identify the important needs of that area in that community. The next step is that you want to define or identify and define an important problem in that community, one that needs to be solved, and one that you're interested in working on. So, how do you choose this problem? First of all, it needs to be uh, specific, and it needs to address specific people. It can't be like a general societal problem. It needs to be something that is a problem or a need that is experienced by actual people in that community. But which problem do you solve? Again, there are lots of potential things to work on in a community. And what I would suggest is that you have certain skills, you're motivated by certain things, you have certain resources available to you. And at the intersection of those skills, that motivation, and resources that you have available is something that I would call the sweet spot. And you want to choose to work on a problem that exists in that sweet spot. It's got to be compatible with the skills that you have or can assemble. It's got to be consistent with your motivation. It's got to be something you want to work on. People talk about being passionate about something, but it's got to be something you really want to do because it's going to be one of the hardest things you've ever done. And you have to have or feel that you can assemble the resources that are necessary to address that problem. So again, at the intersection, in the middle there, you have the sweet spot, and that's where you want to be working. So once you identified an important problem or an important need, that you want to address in that community, the next step is to go about generating a solution, coming up with a solution, and a solution that can be implemented in the form of a for-profit business, because that's what this course is about, generating for-profit business solutions to these problems. So you want to engage in a kind of iterative or brainstorming process, and you want to start by throwing out all kinds of ideas. It can be ideas that seem crazy at first, but then you narrow down these ideas by applying what we call, requirements and specifications. We can get into that later, but you want to gradually come up with the more feasible ideas after you weed out some of the ones that can't be or don't make sense to be implemented. And then you come up with what you feel is the best solution. Now, once you've come up with your solution to the problem you're trying to solve, the next step is to generate a prototype or prototypes and test the prototypes that will give you an idea about the workability of that solution. So you want to test one or more aspects of the solution. Now, a prototype isn't necessarily a complete product. It often isn't a complete product. It can be a picture, it can be a scale model, it could be an ad, it could be a mock-up of a cell phone app, a smartphone app. What you're trying to do is to gather data to determine if this solution is viable and to gather information to inform the development of the product. So now let's move on to the second stage of this overall urban business development process, something we call the customer development process. It's really the customer and marketplace engagement portion of the process. And once again, I want you to think about how did your urban entrepreneur partner engage in these steps? What did they do at each of these steps, the steps that they have completed so far? And what stage of the process are they at right now? That's something to be thinking about. So the first step in the customer development process is something called customer discovery. Now, I know that's kind of confusing, but that's what it's called. And in this step, this customer discovery step, we're basically trying to determine if we have a fit between the problem the customer is experiencing and the solution that we are providing. And in order to be able to determine that, ultimately, we have to present the customer with something called a minimum viable product, or MVP. And this is a version of the product that has, as it suggests, the minimum set of features that the customer is willing to pay for. Because we want to know. The only way we're going to know if we're solving the customer's problem is if the customer is willing to pay for that product. So again, we're trying to determine if our product solves this important problem that we have identified, and if the customer agrees that it solves that problem and they're willing to pay for it to solve that problem. Now, it's one thing to have a product that somebody will buy. It solves a problem for someone, or it solves a problem for a number of people. But then it's a different thing to have a product and a business based on that product, where you can sell the product to enough people to make that business sustainable, right? And to do enough business to pay for the costs of doing business. And so this is the step in the process that we call the customer validation uh, step. And in this step, we're trying to determine, do we have not problem solution fit, but do we have product market fit? Can we sell this thing in a way that we can develop a sustainable business? In other words, do we have a sustainable business model? So, I could give you an example because I'm familiar with the Tesla example. In the early days, Tesla developed this car. It was a great car. Everybody agreed uh, that, for example, the Model S won all kinds of awards, Car of the Year, this sort of thing. Uh, but Tesla didn't have dealers anywhere. And so the car could be as great as it wanted to be, or as great as they wanted it to be. And they had people who were willing to plunk down the money to buy this car. In fact, their earlier car, people paid $120,000 uh, for each copy of this little sports car, electric sports car. That was Tesla's first car. It was the Roadster. So anyway, they had a product that people wanted to buy, but they didn't have a channel to sell it through. And they didn't want to have this product sold by traditional dealers because they felt that dealers' incentive would be to sell the internal combustion engine cars because that's what they were used to selling, because they would make more money on service. So what they ended up doing was creating their own sales channel. And even in places where they weren't allowed to sell by law because they didn't have dealers, uh, Tesla would truck the car in, deliver the car on a flatbed trailer to people. So they had to create this new sales channel to be able to do business. Um, Another example would be there are cell phone manufacturers who I can't think of a specific example, although the iPhone had this issue in early days. In order to sell uh, a mobile phone, smartphone, or any mobile phone, it had to go on one of the providers' networks like Verizon or T-Mobile or something like that. And so typically that's how those products were sold. They were sold uh, to operate on those networks, and you would buy your phone from the carrier, and they would give you a discount on the phone based on you signing up with them for 2 years or whatever. And if you didn't have a deal like that with a carrier, you couldn't sell your phone. When the iPhone came out, they made an exclusive deal with AT&T in order to be able to sell their phone on that network. So that was their channel for getting the phone to customers. So, you have all kinds of examples like that. You have examples that are as simple as soda pop, right? You have a new soft drink, or, you had a lot of people coming out with iced tea drinks, right? A few years back. And you would get into a situation if you were one of these manufacturers where you've got a great tea, people like your tea and so forth, and then you go to a grocery chain to try to get it on the shelf, and you would run into resistance because the big soda manufacturers would say, if you bring that product in here, we're going to take our product away, right? And those grocery chains are selling 1,000 times more of products from Coca-Cola than they're selling from, say, Snapple. And so these upstart companies had to overcome that and find a way to get their product into the channel, to get their product on the shelves. So you run into this over and over again, not just in terms of channel, but in terms of partners, in terms of every aspect of the business model, customer service, and so forth. You have to have a business model that works in order to be able to sell a product sustainably. And so this customer validation step is what you have to execute successfully in order to eventually have a workable business. So, hey, great. You have uh, got a business model that works. You've determined that you can sell this product. Not only do you have a product that solves people's problem, you can sell it using this business model that you have uh, to a lot of people, and you can sustain the company based on those sales. Well, what's the game now? Now the game is to execute that business model in as many places as you can with as many customers as you can to build this business so that you have a more sizable business. You start to reach more customers, you start to generate increased revenues and profits. Now you're starting to cook. You got a product that solves people's problems. You have a business model that works where you can sustainably sell the product, and now you can scale that business to more people, more communities, and really goose the revenues and profits. Now we're getting serious. Now we're getting there. So the final stage in this customer development process is something called company building. This is where we're looking to really scale the organization, add product lines, add people, add facilities. We want to become, a major company, a resilient, large company. And consider the example of Brompton that we discussed in class. You remember that the founder of Brompton came up with this folding bicycle, and it solved a problem for people. It made it easier for them to get around in cities. And so people were willing to buy it. He had people who were, beating on his door to buy this product in the beginning. He sold a few hundred initially. Then he got his business model together. He established manufacturing processes, and he established sales channels in England and abroad. He developed suppliers that could get him the key components at a reasonable price for this product. He got the product out there. He was cooking. Okay. And once he did that, uh, he scaled it up. He started selling in other countries, using this same business model, the same basic bike, but sell throughout Europe, sell in the US, sell in Asia. Uh, got the company to, I don't know, 20, $30 million. Uh, but the next step was to get to this company building phase. Now, you realize that your customers are buying this product because they want to get around easier in cities, and you have your basic product. But part of getting around and having that convenience is uh, having gear to go along with the bike, accessories and gear, and cargo bags and racks and all this kind of stuff. So it came out with those kinds of things, and then uh, people wanted to get around in places that were a little hilly, so they came out with an electric version of the Brompton to satisfy even more customers. And they had people who were interested in the regular old non-electric Brompton, but they wanted something they could get around on and carry even more easily, and something that was faster and sportier. So he came out with a titanium version of the bike, and it came out with a bike that had more gearing. And so basically, they scaled the company by adding product lines, adding facilities, adding suppliers, to the point where now they're probably pushing $100 million company. They're somewhere between 50 and $100 million. So that's an example of how you go from this initial phase of uh, I see the customer has a problem. I've got a solution for that problem. I can construct a business model that accomplishes sustainable sales of this product. I can grow that business model, and now I can grow the company. You can this that Brompton has gone through all of those phases, and they're still within that fourth phase. So those are the steps of uh, the customer development process. So now it's time for you and your team to apply these urban business development uh, process concepts to your urban entrepreneur partner business and to start documenting uh, how your UEP business is doing on some of these steps. So um, I have provided for you kind of a blank presentation that you've started to work on that describes how your urban entrepreneur partner business has addressed this urban business development process. And what you're doing here, you're going back to the beginning. Remember, I said even though these businesses are operating somewhere in that uh, on one of those customer development process steps, you can still go back and think about the earlier stages, the socially engaged design phase, and you can think about what community is being served, right? How was the community selected? And if you were the urban entrepreneur partner, how would you engage with this community? How does the urban entrepreneur partner engage with the community that they are working in? Um, then you want to think about and document what problem is the urban entrepreneur partner seeking to solve. Uh, in the next session, you're going to be documenting the problem that the urban entrepreneur partner is solving in something that we call a problem statement. But what problem are they seeking to solve? Who are they solving it for? And what makes this an important problem? What business solution did the urban entrepreneur partner come up with? That's the business that you're working with. I assume that they think that the business that they are executing is solving some problem in that community. So, what is the solution that they are providing? How did they arrive at that solution? And did they consider other solutions as they were putting in place their business? Often people don't consider other solutions. They jump to a particular the thing that they're thinking about, the thing that comes to them. But sometimes it's useful to think about alternative solutions because it might cause you to adapt the solution you adopted in some way to improve the overall uh, business. So next I'd like you to think about how the urban entrepreneur partner is doing with the customer discovery step, how they've done that or are doing it. Have they established the problem solution fit? Have they developed a business that is a solution to a problem that customers have, that customers are willing to pay for? So explain your conclusion there. Next, think about customer validation. Uh, does the urban entrepreneur partner have a solid business model, or is it still somewhat in flux? In other words, has the urban entrepreneur partner established product market fit? And explain your conclusion on that one. So, we just talked about the four stages of the customer development process: customer discovery, customer validation, customer creation, company building. At what stage of the process is your urban entrepreneur partner's business today? So, uh, that's pretty easy, right? Nothing to it. So that concludes the lesson about the steps in the urban business development process. And one thing I'd like to point out, and I didn't want to muddy the waters with this earlier, but if you think about it, the steps in this process would be the same for any kind of business. Or I would say that they should be the same for any kind of business. It doesn't matter if we're talking about an urban focused business where the entrepreneurs trying to come up with a business that solves a problem for that urban community. Let's say the uh, urban entrepreneur partner is coming up with a product that he wants to sell to the nuclear power industry. He or she wants to sell to the nuclear power industry. Well, that industry, that collection of businesses in that industry, is the community that they're serving. And to be effective, I would contend that they still have to get familiar with that community. They have to choose that community for whatever reason. They have to empathize. They have to define an important problem. They have to come up with a solution to that problem, prototype and test the problem, and then go through those same customer development process steps. So this process that we're putting forth and that you're learning for the urban focused business development would be the same process that you would apply uh, to any other business. We're just applying it in this particular case to solve a problem that exists in an urban community. So keep that in mind. And what this means is that this can be profitable knowledge for you, regardless of what uh, entrepreneurial path you pursue. Okay, so I hope you found this useful, and I'll see you on the next one. All right.